Today, we are doing a full deep dive into the history of House Martell. Let's go all the way back before Dorne was Dorne as we know it. The story starts with a guy named Morgan Martell. He's described as an Andal adventurer, so he comes across the Narrow Sea like a lot of the Andals did, and he ends up settling in Dorne. Now here's the thing people forget. At this point, Dorne is not one unified place. It's a patchwork of different houses, all descended from the first men all fighting over territory. Morgan shows up and basically muscles his way into land controlled by House Wade and House Shell. And the energy is very much, I'll take this, thank you very much. And that's how the dominion of House Martell is born. But, and this is important, the Martells are not instantly the top dog, not even close. Dorne is full of powerful houses at this point, and there are stretches of history where it's actually the Martells bending the knee to somebody else. So don't picture some unstoppable dynasty from day one, it takes time. Everything shifts, however, with the arrival of Nymeria. She comes from Nyshar in Old Essos, leading her 10,000 ships, fleeing because the Valyrian freehold is expanding and swallowing everything in its path. She and her people island hop, city hop, looking for somewhere to land, and eventually they wash up in Dorne. This is where things get interesting, because Nymeria marries Morgan of House Martell, and this marriage is not just a romantic footnote. It's more of a strategic maneuver in every sense. You've got the traditional strength of House Martell combined with everything the Rhoynar are known for, their culture, their tactics, their people, and together they become basically unstoppable. Slowly, house by house, the Martells start picking off the other Dornish rulers, and that's the real origin story of how they became the dominant power in Dorne. Before all of this, the Martell seat was a place called the Sandship, but once fortunes change, the attitude becomes, okay, we clearly need an upgrade. So they build a proper fortress, Sunspear, and they actually build it around the old Sandship, incorporating it into the new structure. Sunspear becomes the seat of House Martell, and it's the seat we know today. Morgan and Nymeria succeed in uniting the whole of Dorne under one banner, but here's the fun detail. They don't call themselves king and queen, they call themselves prince and princess. That's very deliberate, it's a Rhoynar thing. Nymeria was Princess Nymeria back in Nysa, so by keeping those titles, they are baking Rhoynar identity directly into Martell culture, and by extension into Dornish culture as a whole. And it's not just titles, a whole bunch of Rhoynar traditions get folded into the Dornish way of life from this point forward, which is exactly why Dorne feels so different from the rest of Westeros. This is the region where succession doesn't care if you're a boy or a girl. The eldest child inherits full stop, when the next eldest, and so on. Women are held in genuinely high regard, and nobody's clutching their pearls over a child born out of wedlock. All of this traces back to the Rhoynar, bringing in more progressive ideas that fuse with the existing Dornish culture, a real blending of two people into something new. Now, we jump forward. There's a stretch of Martell history that's genuinely foggy. We don't have great records, and we pick the story back up around the time of Aegon's conquest. At this point, House Martell is ruled by Princess Nymeria Martell, affectionately nicknamed the Yellow Toad of Dorne. And Nymeria is exactly the energy you want in a leader facing down dragons. She flatly refuses to yield to the Targaryens. As the rest of Westeros falls, one by one to Aegon and his sisters, Dorne stands completely alone as the last independent principality in the entire continent. The Targaryens try. They leave, they come back, they try again, and every single time, Dornish leaders hold that line. Eventually, Nymeria dies of old age, undefeated, and her son, Nymor, takes over. Nymor takes over a different approach. He wants to broker peace rather than keep fighting people who literally have dragons. So he sends his daughter, Doran Martell, to King's Landing to negotiate directly with Aegon the Conqueror, trying to secure Dorne's future without more bloodshed. By this point, remember, everywhere else in Westeros has fallen. Dorne is standing alone against overwhelming odds. And we get one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the entire book series. Aegon is handed a letter. Nobody, not the characters, not us readers, know what's actually written in it. All we know is Aegon has a massive reaction, storms off to Dragonstone, and comes back 24 hours later, having agreed to leave Dorne alone. Just like that. Everyone else is left confused why Aegon just went to Dragonstone for 24 hours and then just came back and said nothing. And honestly, so are we. To this day, it's one of the biggest what did it actually say mysteries in the whole saga. As a show of good faith afterward, the Martells do return the Scarlet Dragon Meraxes, who died in Dorne alongside Queen Rhaenys during one of the failed conquest attempts. But the letter is the real story. Whatever Nymeria wrote, it worked, because Dorne is left alone for roughly the next 100 years. Fast forward toward the Dance for the Dragons era and we meet Prince Doran Martell. If you've been watching House of the Dragon, you'll remember Daemon and Corlys fighting the Triarchy out in the Stepstones. Well, Doran Martell actually threw Dornish support behind the Triarchy in the conflict. Then, once the dance kicks off itself, Dorne does something that's honestly kind of hilarious given their whole history. They sit it out completely. Their official line is basically, we're not actually part of the Seven Kingdoms, so this isn't our fight. Which is totally plausible deniability. No picking sides between the Greens and the Blacks. And think about the irony here. This is the family that stood up to dragons when nobody else could, and now they're just sitting on the sidelines watching dragon fight dragon. Targaryen tearing apart Targaryen. After everything the Martells went through to defy them, it's just funny, so don't expect to see House Martell picking a side on House of the Dragon. That's historically accurate to just not happen. After the war, Corin's daughter Alejandra Martell takes over, and she's the one who authorizes Dornish forces to go retake the Stepstones. Now we skip ahead to 158 AC, that's 25 years after the dance, roughly 158 years after the conquest. And this is when Dorne technically gets folded into the realm under the King Daeron I, but conquered isn't really the right word because it's nowhere near that clean. The Dornish absolutely do not want to bend the knee, and honestly, put yourself in their position. By this point, the Targaryens don't even have dragons anymore, so if your ancestors, people like Princess Nymeria, said no even in the face of actual dragons, why would you suddenly cave now that the dragons are gone? There are years of grinding conflict before anything gets resolved, and even then, it's less Dorne surrenders and more Dorne gets absorbed. What finally seals it is marriage, as always in this world. Daeron II marries Nymeria Martell, and to lock the alliance in even further, there's a second marriage on top of it. Daeron's sister, one of the many Princess Daenerys Targaryens throughout history. He marries Miria's brother, Doran Martell, so you've got brother-sister pairs marrying brother-sister pairs, and after that, Dorne's independence is basically over. They are part of the Seven Kingdoms now. But here's the silver lining for the Martells. One of their own, Nymeria, is about to become Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, so it's not the bitterest pill to swallow. Honestly, pretty smart move on their part. Not everyone was thrilled about it though. A lot of lords deeply resented the growing Martell and Dornish influence at court, and that resentment is part of what fuels support against Daeron during the Blackfire rebellions. Still, things settle. Dorne actually thrives under this new arrangement. Their ports are perfectly positioned for trade, ships stopping going through constantly, and the region grows genuinely wealthy for a good long stretch. Now we jump to 280 AC, just a few years before Robert's rebellion. Elia Martell marries Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne. So once again, the plan is for a Martell woman to become Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. But here's a detail most people don't know. Elia was never originally supposed to marry Rhaegar. Her mother, the Princess of Dorne, was genuinely close friends with Joanna Lannister, mother of Jaime, Cersei and Tyrion, and the original plan was for their children to marry each other. Elia was meant to marry Jaime, her brother Oberyn was meant to marry Cersei. Then Joanna dies, giving birth to Tyrion, and Tywin scraps the entire arrangement. He's got bigger ambitions for his children now. Specifically, he wants Cersei to marry Rhaegar, but the Martells move fast, and they get there first, securing the marriage for Elia instead. Tywin does not forget being snubbed like that, because his pride takes a hit, and Tywin Lannister is not a man who lets a grudge go unpaid. Keep that in the back of your mind, it matters later. So, Elia and Rhaegar marry and have 2 children, a daughter Rhaenys and a son Aegon, but it is far from a happy household. Elia's pregnancies nearly kill her both times, and after Aegon's birth, it's medically clear she cannot safely have another child. Meanwhile, Rhaegar is spiraling into obsession over the prophecy of the prince that was promised, convinced the dragon needs 3 heads, convinced he needs a 3rd child that Elia physically cannot give him. Enter Lyanna Stark. Right on the eve of the rebellion, Rhaegar and Lyanna disappear together. Whether she went willingly, whether he took her, that's a whole separate conversation. but the result for House Martell is brutal. Elia is left alone in King's Landing with 2 young children while the realm explodes into civil war. Dorne at this point is ruled by Elia's brother, Prince Doran Martell, and understandably, the entire Martell family is furious with Rhaegar. Their support for the Targaryen cause is noticeably slow and reluctant. Doran does eventually send aid, but when Rhaegar falls at the Battle of the Trident, another casualty that day is Prince Lewin Martell, Elia, Doran and Oberyn's uncle, and a member of Aerys' King's Guard. Robert wins at the Trident, and in his grief and paranoia, the Mad King Aerys convinces himself that Lewin somehow betrayed Rhaegar, and the Martells turned cloak. There's zero evidence for this, but Aerys' response is classic Aerys. He takes Elia and her children hostage in King's Landing as insurance, essentially telling the Martells, "Don't you dare abandon us now." When King's Landing falls, Aerys can't and won't protect them. Elia is killed in the sack of the city, so is her daughter Rhaenys. Her son Aegon is also killed, though there's a long-running fan theory that he was secretly swapped and survives as a young Griff. That's a rabbit hole for another video. As far as the official records go, Elia and both her children die in the sack of King's Landing. I'll let you imagine how the Martells reacted to that, because Livid doesn't even begin to cover it. One of the new King Robert's very first moves is sending Jon Arryn all the way to Dorne, just to try smooth things over. This is where Doran Martell really starts showing his skill at the Game of Thrones. Publicly, he agrees to let bygones be bygones, clean slate, moving forward. Privately, he is absolutely not okay, and he never stops scheming. Yes, Aerys is dead, Rhaegar is dead, good riddance, as far as the Martells are concerned, but there are still living Targaryens out there, so Doran sends his brother Oberyn to Essos to try and arrange a marriage between his daughter Arianna and Viserys Targaryen. It never actually happens for one reason or another, but the intent tells you everything about how Doran thinks, and more recently, he sent his son Quentyn across the Narrow Sea to try and ally with Daenerys Targaryen herself. That hasn't exactly gone well for Quentyn, but it proves Doran is still playing a very long game, and he has absolutely not given up. Then there's Oberyn's death in his trial by combat against the Mountain. Just one more grievance stacked on top of everything else. Doran wants revenge on House Lannister. He's been watching, cataloguing, waiting for years, but he plays this like a 3-dimensional chess match, incredibly cautious, incredibly private as well. He won't even tell his own family the full plan. In the books, we start to see him finally cracking the door open, telling the Sand Snakes, telling Arianne, here's what's actually happening, but keep it quiet. Everyone underestimates him. Everyone sees a frail old man in a wheelchair and assume there's no real threat there. Big mistake, never bet against Doran Martell. And that's the story of House Martell, from Rhoynar refugees and Andal adventurers all the way through to the family that defy dragons. Sat out a civil war on principle and is now quietly plotting revenge from behind a wheelchair. Honestly, one of the richest, most underrated houses histories in the whole series. And I have to say, it is exactly why they are one of my favourite houses. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on House Martell and what one of your favourite pieces of history is. And also comment below what house you'd like me to do one on next. I've already done a slight deep dive into House Hightower, so you can go check that video out on my channel. Make sure to like and subscribe.